There it was, folded neatly in the back of the closet behind old coats and forgotten handbags, the red dress. Valeria Sloane hadn't seen it in years, not since the day her husband, Conrad, called it tasteless, snatched it from her hands, and shoved it out of sight. But tonight felt different. As if something long dormant inside her had awakened. Like a slow burning fire finally reaching the surface. She reached out, fingertips trembling slightly as they brushed the fabric. The crimson silk shimmered in the late afternoon light spilling through the sheer curtains. It was still perfect. Not trendy, not designer, but perfect. Sewn by her own hands back when she still believed she could become someone. Before she became his someone. Her reflection in the mirror almost startled her. The dress hugged her frame like it had been waiting for this moment. For her. Her long black hair tumbled over one shoulder, and she painted her lips with a deep scarlet to match. Every detail deliberate, every touch defiant. She heard the sound of polished shoes behind her, then the familiar low command. "You're not going out in that." Conrad stood at the door, arms crossed, a sharp crease in his suit pants, his gaze cold and calculating. He looked her up and down, not like a man seeing his wife, but like a man seeing a problem. Valeria turned back to the mirror, ran her hands down the fabric, and smiled. "Watch me." She walked past him without another word. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. With every step, her pulse grew louder, steadier, bolder. The Sloane's luxury car slid into the circular driveway of the Wexford estate, where the Vale Corporation's annual gala was already in full swing. Strings hummed softly from the garden. Waiters in white moved like dancers, balancing trays of champagne and oysters. A chandelier the size of a car hovered in the vaulted ceiling like a sun made of crystal. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, ambition, and old money. Conrad extended his hand, but Valeria ignored it. She opened the door herself and stepped into the light. Conversations faltered, champagne flutes paused mid-air. For a long moment, the room didn't breathe. Then Marcus Vale stood. He didn't smile, he admired. She felt it, the shift, the weight of every eye in the room turning toward her. Her, not him. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. And Conrad? He remained frozen by the door, jaw tight, hands twitching uselessly by his sides. Valeria exhaled, chin raised. In that red dress, she wasn't just his wife. She was a woman stepping back into her life. The fire had arrived. It wasn't just the dress, it was the way she moved in it. Valeria didn't glide, she claimed space, like the room had belonged to her all along and only now remembered it. As she descended the stairs of the grand Wexford ballroom, murmurs followed. Not the kind that cling to scandal, the kind that signal awe. Her beauty wasn't just surface level. It radiated from a deeper place, from something reclaimed. A waiter offered champagne she accepted with a nod, her fingers poised like she'd been raised with it. Not like a woman who had spent the last decade in her husband's shadow, pouring drinks for his colleagues and smiling on cue. She caught sight of Conrad across the room, flanked by other executives in expensive suits, his carefully crafted image already starting to fray. His eyes tracked her like a threat. He was smiling, yes, that polished CEO smile, but his jaw ticked. His fingers drummed nervously against his glass. For once, he wasn't in control of the narrative. And then Marcus Vale. The CEO stood at the head table like a king among courtiers. When his gaze landed on Valeria, his expression changed. Not the usual patronizing charm reserved for a subordinate's wife, but curiosity. Recognition. Something deeper. He walked toward her, not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. "Mrs. Sloane," he said, with that low, steady voice, extending his hand. "Or may I call you Valeria?" His words weren't a question of etiquette. They were an invitation. Valeria took his hand. Valeria's perfect. She felt the moment stretch between them. Around them, whispers started new, but softer now. Reverent. "I don't believe we've officially met," Marcus continued. "Though I've seen you before, you were always there, quietly dazzling." Valeria tilted her head. "And tonight?" He smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel like a secret had just been shared. "Tonight, you stepped out of a shadow." Behind them, Conrad approached, quickly, sharply, his voice low, strained. "Marcus, I was hoping to introduce you to—" "I've already had the pleasure," Marcus said, not even looking at him. Valeria was just about to join me at the table. Conrad's face hardened. "That's not—" Marcus raised an eyebrow. Just slightly, but with weight. The kind of gesture that reminded everyone whose name was on the building. Valeria didn't wait for permission. She turned, looped her arm into Marcus's, and let him lead her to the center of the room, to the very seat Conrad had reserved for himself. The silence said it all. The center table sparkled with silver and glass, but Valeria was the brightest thing there. Every glance confirmed it. She wasn't the accessory tonight. She was the feature. Marcus leaned in as dessert was served, voice smooth. That dress, it's not couture, is it? No, Valeria said, a flicker of something proud in her tone. I made it years ago. His gaze sharpened. So you're a designer? I was, or I wanted to be. Her eyes drifted briefly to Conrad, until life became something else. Marcus studied her for a beat longer than polite society would allow. Some talents don't vanish. They wait for the right moment. And somehow Valeria knew this was that moment. The evening unfolded with layers she hadn't expected. Laughter, conversation, interest, all directed at her, not filtered through Conrad, not assigned, earned. She didn't touch her phone all night. Not once, but somewhere someone did. A photograph, her at the center table, smiling, Marcus beside her, found its way online. The caption, "Who is she?" By morning, the answer would ripple across more screens than she could imagine. But for now, she let herself feel it. Not revenge, not even pride, just freedom. Valeria barely remembered dessert. Not because it wasn't exquisite, it was, but because everything else had eclipsed it. The way the strings swelled just as Marcus raised his glass to toast her presence. The subtle nods from the other guests who, moments ago, hadn't known her name but now hung on her every word. The soft glimmer of the chandeliers dancing against the red of her dress. It wasn't magic, it was power. And power, she was beginning to realize, wasn't something you had to take, it was something you could remember. She stepped away from the table and made her way toward the balcony. The evening air wrapped around her like silk, cool against the flush of her cheeks. Below, the city glittered, a pulse of light and motion. Freedom personified. Behind her, the glass doors hissed open. She didn't need to turn. Valeria! Conrad's voice, too soft to be sincere, too sharp to be ignored. She turned slowly, arms crossed gently in front of her. Not defensive, just done. You caused a scene. She tilted her head. Did I? I just sat where I was invited. Conrad stepped closer. His jaw was tight, his movement stiff. The mask he wore at every corporate dinner, every investor meeting was cracking, and underneath, the man was unraveling. You humiliated me in front of Marcus, he hissed. Do you have any idea what tonight was supposed to be? Valeria's expression remained calm. Enlighten me. He leaned in, eyes cold. I was going to introduce you as the image of my brand, the elegant, obedient wife of a future CEO. Do you think it was an accident this gala was scheduled during the merger? Obedience, she echoed, her voice like ice. Don't twist my words. They don't need twisting, she said. They sound just as pathetic on their own. His composure shattered. You think a red dress and a dinner table makes you something? No, she said, stepping around him back toward the ballroom. But believing in myself again does. She didn't wait for his reply. Inside, the quartet had shifted into something more upbeat. Laughter floated on the air, and her name was being whispered at more than one table. Marcus stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a board member, but when his eyes met hers, he excused himself without hesitation. Didn't even touch her. Not yet. But his presence was grounding. You okay? He asked. I will be, she replied, then added almost playfully, did you know my husband intended to use me as part of his business pitch tonight? I had a feeling, Marcus said. He's always treated people like assets. And what do you see when you look at people? She asked, not flirtatious, just curious. He smiled, not the charming kind, but something rarer, respectful, warm. Possibility. They didn't speak for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her something. A small handwritten note on crisp ivory paper. It read, your dreams deserve a stage. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. MV. Valeria blinked, and for the first time that evening, felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. He leaned closer, voice low. There's a charity showcase next month. It's black tie, high profile, real fashion press. I want your designs on that runway. I don't even have a line, she said, almost laughing. You will, he said simply, and if you need a space to work, you'll have it. My team will call you tomorrow. A camera flashed across the room, subtle but unmistakable. Someone else had noticed them. She didn't care. What she did care about was the clarity blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, her life was being written not in compromise, but in ink of her own choosing. Across the room, she saw Conrad again. This time he wasn't angry. He was afraid. not because she had embarrassed him, but because she had become ungovernable. She walked past him without slowing, not offering a glance. He reached out almost instinctively to grab her arm, but a suited guard moved between them in a flash, silent and firm. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" the guard asked. Valeria smiled. "Perfect, thank you." She kept walking. Conrad, sputtering, tried to protest, but this wasn't his home. His name didn't carry weight here. Not anymore. Later that night, in the quiet of her car, her phone buzzed. A photo. She and Marcus, the dress, the city lights behind them, and already it was spreading. The caption? Power, in red. Valeria looked out the window. The soft curve of a smile playing on her lips. No rage, no regret, just a quiet promise to herself. This wasn't revenge. This was arrival. The next morning, the world woke up to her, Valeria Sloan. The name she'd almost forgotten how to claim was everywhere. On social media, her photograph in the red dress flooded fashion accounts, women's lifestyle pages, even business profiles, captioning her with words like grace, boldness, rebirth. The original post from a freelance photographer had gone viral within hours. The comment section pulsed with energy. Who is she? This is how you leave with style. A red dress and a revolution. And then a tweet from a fashion editor with over 500,000 followers. This woman needs a runway, not a ring. Valeria sat in her modest kitchen, coffee steaming in her hand, barefoot, hair still mussed from sleep. And yet, the moment felt more glamorous than any party. The buzz wasn't about Marcus, though some speculated about him. It wasn't even about Conrad. It was about her presence, her power, her silence that said, "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. Look at me. I am enough." The call came shortly after 9 a.m. "Miss Sloan," a polished voice asked. "This is Madeline Trent. I run editorial features for Avenue Vogue. We'd love to interview you. Something candid, personal, empowering. Your moment last night has captured our audience." Valeria blinked. Avenue Vogue, the magazine she used to flip through during lunch breaks at her design internship. Dreaming. "Yes," she said, and her voice didn't tremble. "I'd love that." When the call ended, she stood in her small studio room, a space she hadn't entered in months, and stared at her sewing machine. Dust clung to the edges like time holding its breath. She exhaled and pulled the cover off. By afternoon, she had thread between her fingers again, pins in her mouth, sketches littered across the floor. The hum of the machine was a song she remembered without hearing it for years. Her movements weren't polished, not yet, but they were hers. Then came the knock. And Conrad. He stood at her doorstep, a tailored coat draped over his arm, expression somewhere between calculated and desperate. "You've ignored every one of my messages," he said. "That's correct," Valeria replied, stepping into the doorway but not offering to let him in. "We need to talk." "Funny," she said. "That's exactly what I asked for years." He sighed, glancing behind her into the apartment as if searching for signs of Marcus. "Look, I know I was rigid, controlling, but what you're doing now, it's reckless, public, dangerous." "Dangerous?" she echoed, crossing her arms. "To who?" "To you. You're exposing yourself to the wrong kind of attention. You're letting people use you." Valeria raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. That never bothered you before?" "When you were doing the using," his mask cracked. "You're being dramatic. Marcus is just flattering you because you're new and photogenic." Valeria chuckled. "Photogenic? That's your word for talent now?" "He's manipulating you, Valeria. He wants something." "Good," she said. "So do I." Conrad blinked. "I want to create. I want to be seen. I want to matter outside your calendar of networking events. And guess what, Conrad? I already do." "You've thrown everything away?" "No," she said. "I'm picking everything up." He pulled out a thick envelope. "You'll want to read this before you make any more decisions." She hesitated. Took it. Inside, a legal agreement. Financial breakdowns, her name beside his in a list of business holdings she didn't even know existed, and an offer. If she signed, she'd be guaranteed a lump sum settlement and a media clause forbidding her from speaking publicly about anything personal. Silence for a payout. Valeria looked up. "You're trying to buy me into invisibility." "I'm protecting our brand." "No, you're protecting yourself." And the answer is no. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. "If you go through with this, the designs, the press, the fashion show, I'll make sure no one takes you seriously again. You'll be a tabloid punchline, a cautionary tale." Valeria tilted her head. "You're scared?" He flinched. is scared because you don't know how to control a woman who doesn't need you, and that terrifies you. She handed the envelope back, untouched. I'm not your asset. I'm not your wife. I'm not your damage control. I am Valeria Sloan, and you just became a footnote. He shut the door, and for a long time stood there, heart pounding. Then she turned back to her sewing machine and smiled. The lights dimmed, music faded, then silence. And the first model stepped onto the runway. Varia stood behind the velvet curtain, barely breathing. The show had only just begun, but her hands were already trembling, not with fear, but with a high-voltage thrill. Her name had been printed on the program in glossy silver ink. Velia Sloan, Debut Collection. Below it, one word. Reclaimed. Model after model moved through the space in pieces Valeria had designed in secret, in silence, over long nights and early mornings. Flowing lines, bold cuts, defiant color, feminine without apology, sharp without compromise. Each look told a story she hadn't been allowed to say out loud. Until now. And at the end, when the final model stepped onto the stage, the crowd audibly gasped. It was the red dress, the original, pressed, mended, and worn by a tall, statuesque figure who moved like a promise. When she reached the center of the runway and turned, the lights caught the fabric just right, and for a moment the room seemed to exhale. Then came the applause. Not polite, not dutiful. Roaring, Valeria stepped onto the stage. She'd bow, she'd wave. She simply stood there, in a black tailored suit of her own design, her head held high, and smiled. In the front row, Marcus Vail rose to his feet. So did the rest of the audience. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, her name echoed like thunder. Afterward, in the soft quiet of the after-party, Marcus handed her a glass of champagne. You set fire to the room, he said. She took the glass, her smile quieter now. It wasn't about fire. It was about light. He clinked his glass to hers. Well, you lit something, and it's not going out. Weeks passed. The studio she opened was small but elegant. White walls, tall windows, and an entire section dedicated to fabric samples and sketches. In the center, a mannequin stood dressed in the now famous red dress, preserved behind a glass case. Above it, in minimalist lettering, she wore her freedom. Valeria gave interviews, not many, just the right ones. She didn't dwell on Conrad, nor did she villainize him. She didn't need to. He did that himself. After her show went viral, reporters dug into his business dealings. Stories emerged, internal silencing tactics, contract disputes, questionable investor pressure. Within a month, his board issued a vote of no confidence. He was quietly removed. He reached out to her once after that, a single message. You win. Valeria didn't respond because it wasn't about winning. It was about remembering. Her studio became a haven for other women who had given up on their some days. Former architects, dancers, mothers, caretakers. They came in looking hesitant, then started sketching again, stitching again, becoming again. In Valiere, she worked beside them, not above them. Some days she sewed, some days she taught. But every day she stood in her truth. One evening, as she packed up alone, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She almost let it go, then answered. Valeria Sloan, a smooth voice asked. Yes, this is Camille Dubois from Maison Elan Paris. We've been following your work. We're curating a global showcase next season. If you're open to it, we'd love for you to be part of it. There was a pause. Then Valeria smiled. I'm ready. She ended the call, turned out the lights, and walked out of the studio, her red coat catching in the wind, a flame against the night. The city glowed ahead of her. And this time, she wasn't walking away from anything. She was walking into everything.